If you have a ton of HomeKit devices like I do, you're very familiar with this. Seeing this accessories no response error is one of the most frustrating things about having a smart home. And when it comes to HomeKit switches, there's exactly one brand that hasn't let me down. It's not these. Hope I didn't hit anything. Now, if you followed my channel, you know I have tried pretty much every brand of smart switch that works with HomeKit. I have Aqua, Meris, Belkin Wemo, Leviton, and honestly, all of those have let me down at some point. I've even memorized how to reset the Wi-Fi and factory reset all the different brands of switches. On a Leviton, hold the top button for 3 seconds, the light blinks, and it'll reconnect to Wi-Fi. On Belkin, hold it for 3 seconds till the light blinks, and maybe it'll reconnect to Wi-Fi. But there's only one HomeKit light switch that has never let me down in the many years I've used them, and that is Lutron. Now, when we first built this house over a year and a half ago, I was trying to get the most economical switches because I was getting a lot of them. I mean, a lot of switches. And so Meris was the cheapest if I didn't need any dimming, Wemo and Leviton switches were somewhere in the middle, and Lutron were just the most expensive. But I also knew they were the most reliable, so I did get a lot of their older switches, especially for ceiling fan control and for some of the main areas. But in my main bathroom specifically, I got these Belkin Wemo ones. This older model I have here, I got the Demo and the regular switch models, and these were Wi-Fi only, no thread. Wemo does have a thread version of their switch, which is about $50. It would probably be more reliable. And Eve also has a thread HomeKit switch, but no dimmer on either of these. And frankly, both the Wemo, the Eve, and other switches just don't look like normal switches. Now, Leviton switches look pretty good. They match even with dumb paddle switches next to them. And I do have some of those. They're pretty good, but they still disconnect periodically. But recently, Lutron released a new dimmer and switch that works with HomeKit using their bridge. It is the most expensive switch, $73 for the dimmer, about $63 for the smart switch. You might be able to find it cheaper in something like Home Depot, but they look amazing because they just look like normal switches. I think it's a vast improvement over their older style, which was just kind of flat against the wall, lots of iconography on the switch, and so these look great. And I've resisted upgrading because A, they're expensive, and B, I just didn't want to deal with switching out the switches anymore. Well, these Belkin ones have been disconnecting more and more, and even on the latest factory resets, I couldn't even connect them back to HomeKit. It was just impossible to work. So in my master bathroom, there's 4 switches, and I got rid of the Belkin ones, that one went behind me, and replaced it with all Lutron switches, and I couldn't be happier. Now, when it comes to installation, if you've never swapped out a light switch, it can be a little intimidating. Number 1, turn off the breaker to that room. If you don't have labeled breakers, take a few minutes, ideally have someone inside the house on the phone so they can tell you which breaker is for which room, label all the breakers so you know, and turn off the breaker for the switches that you're going to work on. You do not want to electrocute yourself. And Lutron gives you all the instructions in the box. You have the load switch, you have ground, some require a neutral. These new switches in particular, the Claro switch, non-dimmer, this one actually requires a neutral wire. Lutron's older iconography style switches did not require a neutral at all. This one requires a neutral, but the new dimmer, Diva, actually does not require a neutral. These also still work with Lutron's Pico remote and all that. Follow the instructions, match the wires, load wires, grounds, neutrals, all of that. I was able to swap out 4 switches total in about 30 minutes. And I even messed up on one, even after doing it many times. It's okay to mess up. Before I screw them back into the gang box, I turn on the breaker, I make sure each switch works. One didn't, had to swap 2 wires, and then I was good to go. Now, depending on your house, I have a bunch of wires in these gang boxes, and so I really have to push them back. Even screwing the switch in at the end is the final push of these wires back into the box. But it's been okay so far. I've done this in every gang box. Now, my last house was an older home, and I had no neutral wire, no ground, just the load and the other one. Lutron's older switches with the iconography works with those, no neutral required. So if you have an older home, I do recommend these older Lutron switches. They have the fan control, dimmer, and just regular switches, and they're a little cheaper than the Diva and Claro. I turn the breaker on, make sure all the switches are working, and then I'll screw them fully back into the wall and put the wall plate. Quick side note, I got this battery-powered screwdriver on one of the Prime days. It has all the bits in the bottom, and then on the actual drill, you can go forward and back. You have 3 power settings right here, and you can turn it off. There's a light on the top, which is really helpful, especially when you're changing light switches because the power's out. And the best part, you actually charge it with USB-C. 2 thumbs up. I'll put a link to this screwdriver down in the video description if you want to pick it up. Now, once everything's installed and you've turned the power back on, it's time to add these to the Lutron app. Now, again, you do need a Lutron bridge in order to use Lutron lights with HomeKit. You can actually get a Diva Smart Switch and the hub for $114, which is pretty good, whereas the hub by itself would be $80. I'll put links to all of that in the video description, but I've had the same hub for a long time, and you can add a lot of Lutron devices. Now, once you've paired the hub into HomeKit, adding these switches to the Lutron app is incredibly fast. You say you're going to add a light, You hold the bottom switch for 10 seconds, it blinks, and it connects almost instantly. It's wild. And of all the third-party apps that communicate with HomeKit, Lutron is one of the best. The room names that I've set are actually in the Lutron app, and when I add the switch in the Lutron app, it shows up in that room in the Home app on my iPhone, which is awesome. They have a great method for adding multiple lights, one right after another, so I was able to add all 4 lights at once, and boom, they were in HomeKit. Now when I went to the Home app, there were 2 immediately visible, and the other 2 didn't show up right away. I went back to the Lutron app, tapped the device, hit edit, and once I did that, then they automatically showed up in the Home app. So you might have to do that when you first set it up, but after that, rock solid. Never have an issue. And listen, I live in Florida, we've had hurricanes, numerous power outages. Even through all those power outages, the Lutron switch always reconnects, and I have never had to reset one ever. It's wild. Now once the switches are in HomeKit, you can of course move them around, add them to a different room, and that'll sync back to the Lutron app. You change the little icon and the names, and I was able to set up my favorite automation. And this automation wasn't working because my Wemo switches were not connecting anymore. This automation I have, typically when you leave a master bathroom, if you turn off one light, you're really intending to turn all the lights off. So I set up an automation in the HomeKit app, and the trigger is when an accessory is controlled. I choose the main vanity lights, which is the far left switch in this 3-gang box, and when I turn that light off, every other light in the bathroom will turn off simultaneously. This way you don't have to go around and hit all the switches, hit that one off switch when you leave, and all the bathroom lights turn off at once. It's one of my favorite automations. I encourage if you have HomeKit devices, try setting up when an accessory is controlled for rooms that you know you turn off all the lights every time when you leave. And now all these Lutron lights are right here in the Home app, super fast to control. I can scroll down and see they're here in Lutron. And when I go to the Lutron app, I see all the same lights. Again, there's my bathroom lights there. I still have 2 Leviton switches in the bathroom. These have actually been pretty solid. I don't usually have to reset these, even though they're pretty far away from the Wi-Fi network. So I'm not gonna switch those out just yet, but I will say seeing these accessories with no response is just crazy frustrating. And right now I still have a Belkin switch right here that is not responding. This is the utility room light. I've already reset the Wi-Fi on it. I'm probably gonna have to factory reset and re-add to HomeKit. And again, let me just say, if you're gonna have a smart home, you wanna go all in on switches or whatever devices, get ones that are super reliable. And I have to say, Lutron switches, both ceiling fan control, straight switches, and dimmers, they are just the most reliable switch that works with HomeKit that I have ever used. And again, I have tried pretty much all of them. So if you have any questions about HomeKit switches, devices, or automations, leave a comment below this video. Also stay tuned, I'm going to be doing an updated tour of the home because I've added some smart locks, new devices. Last year's tour is up on the channel and it's actually one of my most viewed videos ever. So you can check that out. I'm going to have some updates soon, so subscribe here, like this video, and if you want to know about some automations that I use around the house, check out this video up here, including some HomeKit buttons and just cool automations like with my garden hose and shades. Pretty fun. And if you want to learn more about HomeKit devices for outdoors, maybe the backyard, I have this video here as well. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.